Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story.
And why not? Thought Sharon. The young man continued his butterfly curls. His arms and neck glistened with sweat under the gym's soft lights. Sharon noticed he'd become a member almost 4 months ago. He'd been a 6'3" lanky string bean with bad facial hair. Now he was a 6'3" three-toned chiseled beanstalk. Though not huge, his muscles were well defined. His jawline could slice cheese. Sharon also noticed he came to the gym the same 3 days a week she did. It couldn't be a coincidence. She must be the reason. His dark brown eyes had a strange, severe intensity to them. He scrutinized everything that fell under his gaze as if trying to stare through it, and moved on once satisfied there was nothing more to see. And yet, again and again, his eyes returned to her. He looked away whenever she turned to face him. The attempt to hide his interest was futile. Giant mirrors filled the gym. Everyone could see everyone from almost any angle. And why not? Thought Sharon again. Why shouldn't he look? Maybe she motivated him to get in shape and improve himself. At 41 years old, she looked amazing. Her skin was clear and creamy, her blonde hair thick and shiny. She'd been a 5'4" curvy girl ever since high school. She was even more curvy now. With her workout regimen, the baby weight from her pregnancy had redistributed beautifully. Her bust and hips had widened, her waist had narrowed, and all three had tightened. If that wasn't inspiring, what was? She should be his model, role model, whatever. Sharon positioned herself directly in front of the young man, facing the mirror, her back to him. Between each of his butterfly curls, she did a squat. Every time she dropped it down, she watched the reflection of his long, taut arms spread out, straining against the weights. She watched him watching her firm, round buttocks, stretching her yoga pants so tight, her skin was nearly visible underneath. Today, she would catch him looking, no more deniability. It was time he knew she knew. At the end of her last rep of squats, Sharon placed the medicine ball on the floor. She turned sideways, put her foot atop the ball and both hands on her knee. She arched her back a perfectly innocent stretch. Then for the finisher, Sharon closed her eyes. She ran her hand under her thigh all the way around to her hip. She let a soft groan escape her full lips. 1, 2, 3, she counted, then whipped her head toward the young man, flashing her sweetest smile. He wasn't there. He was nowhere to be seen. The eyes of 5 other gym goers and 2 employees, men and women, were glued to her. Damn it, she thought, goddamn. Had he finished his reps at the exact same time, of all the bad luck? Sharon didn't mind others staring, that was nothing new, but she couldn't make a habit of putting on a show like that. It would attract unwanted attention. Peeved, she picked up the medicine ball and replaced it on the shelf. As she passed by the machine the man had used, a powerful aroma struck her. Unwittingly, she wandered toward it. She saw the source of the scent. Sweat shone off the backrest. It was musky, sweet, and intoxicating. How had she not noticed this before? Had they really never been close enough? The pit of her stomach tingled. Hold on, came a dry, deep voice behind her. Sharon turned with a gasp. It was the young man. He was so much taller close up. His jaw seemed dangerously heavy. She folded her arms across her bare midriff, unable to make a sound. His pheromones were overpowering. I forgot to wipe down the machine. Oh, Sharon finally said. The man went to work, wiping his sweat with a towel. She clasped her hands together and pulled her shoulders inward. He'd missed her big performance a minute ago, but it'll do in a pinch. But when he stood up again, he looked straight into her bright blue eyes. That strange, stern look that she had only ever noticed from afar was penetrating right into her eyes. She could not move. The temperature rose on her cheeks. The stronger she got, the more she froze. An hour later, the young man nodded curtly. All yours, he said, and walked off. Thank you, she breathed inaudibly. Sharon let herself fall onto the seat. She was too weak to lift a single pound. She had to get out of there and into the showers. Some cold water would help. Cold water didn't help. Sharon was still excited, and now she wanted a close encounter even more. She was so confused that 3 cars honked at her on the way home. She paced up and down the house across mahogany floors, velvet carpets, marble tiles. She threw herself down on one designer couch after another, only to get up and whisk herself restlessly to another room. Not one thing in the whole 3-story home interested her. She was hungry. None of the ready-made gourmet meals in the fridge appetized her. She was bored. The automatic recliners in the home theater couldn't contain her. She was lonely. The neighbor's party was still a week off. The book club wouldn't meet till tomorrow. Desmond wouldn't be home till late. It was odd. Desmond hadn't mentioned any new clients, but he seemed to spend more and more time at the firm lately. Sharon couldn't help but wonder. An affair. She brushed the thought from her mind. From the living room, the antique grandfather clock rang the time 4. 500. Cassidy should be home by now. Sharon retrieved her phone and called. At length, her daughter responded, "Yeah, Mom, where are you?" "With friends. I'm spending the night at Janet's." A surge of voices, male and female, cheered in the background. She said it was okay. "Who else is there?" asked Sharon. "Friends. I told you. What about Janet's parents?" "They're out of town." "Out of town? Cassidy, you need to tell me if you won't be home, especially if—" "Okay, well, I told you, bye." Before Sharon could say another word, the call disconnected. Ever since Desmond had given Cassidy that car for her 18th birthday, she'd spent as much time out of the house as possible. Desmond didn't care what she did as long as her grades stayed up, and they did straight A's. She never seemed to study. How did she do it? But Sharon didn't want to think about that either. She circled the beautiful glass coffee table. So many pretty things in this big, pretty house, and she was all alone in it. What if someone came to rob this place, she thought suddenly. The idea gave her a thrill. What if a man broke in to steal something, a strong man but also slender, so he could slip away and escape? Sharon thought of the young man from the gym, his wiry, taut frame in a black turtleneck, gloves, and ski mask. She did a little twirl and sat on the edge of the coffee table. What would he steal? Her jewelry. A few earrings, necklaces, and her wedding ring. Not enough, not for him, the paintings. Too difficult to move, the safe. Only Desmond knew the combination. There must be something else he could take. Sharon slid to the floor. She lay flat. He could do it, just right here in the middle of her house. She shuddered, her luxuriant blonde locks spilling over the Persian carpet. She took off her yoga clothes. The invader could use the situation as he wished. Shivering, Sharon ran her fingertips over her skin. The young man needed her. She was there to pass the time. It didn't matter if he had a ski mask on. She would have recognized his eyes anywhere, those dark, fierce eyes staring deep into hers. She began to pleasure herself, speeding up little by little, but not by his hands. Hands with long fingers touch her. Sharon heard a gasp. It had not come from her. In 1 second, she was on her feet, covering herself with a throw pillow, screaming. Before her was a short, heavy-set, middle-aged Latin American woman, covering her eyes, also screaming. "Paula, oh my God, oh my God." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Crawford. It's Thursday, 4:30, cried the Honduran maid, still covering her eyes. "Thursday? Oh no, I forgot, of course," said Sharon. Terror had shocked her out of bliss. Shaking and out of breath, she did her best to gather her clothes while keeping covered. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Crawford," said Paula, beginning to wail. Poor thing, she's worried about her job, Sharon thought. She can't even open her eyes. She took Paula's wrist and lowered him. "Hey, it's okay," she cooed. Paula firmly averted her eyes. "It's not your fault, Paolo. Do not worry. Take as much time as you need." The stocky Latina didn't move a muscle until Sharon backed out of the room. If she had sneaked a sidelong glance, the sight of disheveled blonde hair, sharp flushed cheeks, and voluptuous femininity would have prompted Paula to behave very unprofessionally. "Look at me, right here, baby." Sharon held Desmond's face with both hands. Beads of sweat ran off his forehead and soaked the gray hair at his temples. His hazel eyes were dazed and lost. Sharon lay in wait for him. When he got home, Desmond always went straight to the office to put some things in the safe. That's when she hit with her clothes. It was like a trap that released the most dangerous part of her, the one that now held her captive. Crimson red and panting, Desmond hugged her. He had to hold on to something. The room was spinning. Where did it come from? They never did that in the office. She looked so beautiful in this outfit. But oh God, why did it have to be this night of all nights? "Paula caught me," Sharon said. She had to use every new thing she could. They didn't talk for a week. It was becoming commonplace. She wanted multiple pleasures tonight. I was enjoying myself in the living room. She saw me. It was hard to tell if Desmond heard, but it didn't matter. She was so close. She thought about who she would like to see in her place, who she would like to be with her now. A wave swept over her. As she weakened, Desmond was able to push her aside. He lay with his eyes closed. No relief, just exhaustion. Sharon sat next to him on the floor. Her lips touched his shoulder pleadingly. Her hand touched his, but there was no response. "That was good," said Sharon. "Let's go again." Desmond grimaced as her fingers brushed his shaft. He grasped her hand. "Sharon, I'm very tired," he groaned. "Some other night, okay." He picked himself up, using his wide rosewood desk for support. He stumbled to the bedroom, not even bothering to close his shirt or zipper. Sharon gathered up his suit jacket and pulled it around her. Why hadn't he come? She wondered. Too much work. Desmond's briefcase lay on the floor by the safe. He'd been in the middle of turning the combination when she jumped him. What could he be working on so hard? Sharon knelt by the case and opened it. Nothing out of the ordinary: files, notes, pens, papers filled with legalese. A cell phone. This wasn't his. Sharon turned it on. 2 unread text messages. Wait, thought Sharon, she shouldn't open these. They'd be marked as read. Desmond would know she went through his things. As a lawyer, he had access to information that had to stay between himself and his clients, for their sake and his and hers, hence the safe. For absolute deniability, he'd told her, but surely it wouldn't hurt to maybe glance at 1 or 2 photos. If she hadn't already been on her knees, the site would have brought her to them. Sharon idly scrolled through image after image of a slim, gorgeous East Asian girl. Not just beautiful, but frank. Every particle of it, from any position. In the last one, the Asian girl smiled at Sharon's camera with her face dirty, as if mocking her. The timestamp showed 8:18 p.m. that day, not 2 hours ago. The oldest timestamp was 6 months. Sharon let the phone fall in her lap. What she felt was not anger nor sadness, not outrage, shame, nor disgust, but calm. The contents of that phone were not just a monument of lies, deceit, and a broken home, but permission. Permission to act on her urge toward the young man from the gym. Though Desmond didn't know it, he had unleashed her. What she felt was the calm before the storm. This is bad, Sharon thought. Not only did the young man not show up at the gym, she had to put up with 3 other guys flirting throughout her workout. Of course, last time her little exhibition attracted unwanted attention. And to top it off, there was a long line to the coffee shop. It was packed. All she wanted to do was sit back, relax, and drink caffeine through the headache she felt coming on. Even small comforts eluded her today. Sharon ordered her whole milk latte and shoved her hands deep in the pockets of her hoodie. Why hadn't he been there? He always came when she did. She scanned the room hopelessly for an empty table. Maybe someone would leave. What caught her eye instead was a pair of taut, vascular forearms. They suddenly appeared out of a gray hoodie in the corner. Their owner pulled up the sleeves, and large, veiny hands returned to a laptop keyboard. The veins seemed wired into the machine, channeling power from the arms to a screen that illuminated a pair of intense brown eyes. It was him, Sharon. She jumped. The barista had evidently called her name several times. Embarrassed, Sharon collected her latte and made her way to the young man's table. "Is anyone sitting here?" she asked. He drew his hood back, ruffling his thick brown hair. Regrettably, his eyes stayed fixed on his work. "Go ahead," he said. Sharon sat and watched him over the rim of her drink. One of his hands lifted off the keyboard and stroked his chin in contemplation. She couldn't decide what she wanted more, to stroke that face herself or for that hand to stroke hers. The hand dropped to a gym bag near his feet, retrieved a flash drive, and inserted it into the laptop. Gym bag, then she remembered she'd had a bad day and it was his fault. Just where had he been? Sharon extended one leg and nudged the bag before crossing it over her other. "Where were you?" Finally, he looked up at her, his stern gaze turned to recognition. "Oh," he said, "I lost track of time. I got this idea for how to program the—" He stopped, studying her. "Are you keeping tabs on me?" Sharon didn't realize, but her foot was perched on tiptoe to make her running shorts ride as high as possible. She shrugged, just wondering. "I usually see you there. You're not going to be one of those guys who skips leg day, are you?" "No." He chuckled, stretching. His arms and shoulders towered over her. "You shouldn't skip leg day," she said, enjoying the view. "It's important." "I can see that," he said. Sharon was suddenly very aware of her naked, crossed legs, perched on one toe, practically on display. Her cheeks flushed. She uncrossed her legs with a little kick, then with a flourish recrossed them. He was captivated. Then his eyes shot to hers. He saw her smiling sweetly at him over her coffee cup. He knew he'd been caught. With rigid formality, he held her gaze for an obligatory 2 blinks before looking back at his computer screen. He clicked a few keys, but she could tell it was for show. In place of their usual severity, his eyes held forced blankness. "I'm Sharon." She extended her hand. When he took it, she felt the size and strength of his own envelop hers. She was secure but not stuck. She felt safe. "Travis, have you lived in the Bay Area long?" "About 5 months." "How old are you?" "It's not polite to ask." Sharon almost spit out her latte. "Oh, come on, 23. He smirked. "So you came here for work?" "Yeah, I make VR simulations." "Oh, of what?" "Nothing yet. We're still working on the horizon. Horizon's gotta be rock, solid. Otherwise, it's like floating in a fishbowl, you know." Travis removed the flash drive from his laptop and closed it. He was about to leave. "So you're a programmer," she said. "Sometimes that's part of it." "A programmer? Sure, if you like." He smiled. Soon you'll be walking around with huge arms and shoulders on spindly little legs, looking like a genie that popped out of a bottle. Travis laughed. Carrying my shoulders around will be my leg workout. He packed his computer in his gym bag and slung it over his shoulder. Sharon stood, unwilling to let him get away so soon. Have you been to the beach? Her mind raced for more to say. No, never, never. I'm from Wyoming. We don't have beaches. Well, you have to go. I will, sometime. This was her chance. She'd always wanted to try what she had in mind at a beach, and she knew just the one. They'd have it all to themselves. What about right now? Now? I know a great one. It has an amazing horizon. Sharon felt the weight of his eyes caress her features, her high cheekbones, sharp jawline, pointed nose, down the curve of her neck. All right, he said. He picked up his last item from under the table, a motorcycle helmet. I'll follow your car. Oh, Sharon thought quickly. Actually, my car's at home. I ran to the gym today. She lied. Before he could answer, she said, but we can take your motorcycle. I've never ridden one before. Are you sure? She nodded. You'll have to hold on tight. I will. You'll have to wear my helmet. It's kinda sweaty. Okay. She had to stop herself from saying perfect. Sharon was in heaven. She hugged her thighs to Travis's hips, her hands across his abs. He leaned on the handlebars, locked still. The world rushed past them. The broken white lines on the road were nearly solid. Wind nipped her legs and hands. It made his body heat cozier. Snug against him, Sharon inhaled his scent. She attempted to synchronize her breath with his. Whenever they breathed in at the same time, it brought their bodies that much closer together. His breaths were long and deep. Hers were too fast. She wanted to experience him with all her senses. There was one left to go. She didn't realize the world was holding still again until Travis got off the bike. They were parked at their destination. He stood over her, the setting sun at his back. Rays of gold light cut around him. Looking right in her eyes, Travis placed a hand on either side of her head. Sharon let her eyelids fall closed and her lips part the fifth and final sense. She didn't realize the world was holding still again until Travis got off the bike. They were parked at their destination. He stood over her, the setting sun at his back. Rays of gold light cut around him. Looking right in her eyes, Travis placed a hand on either side of her head. Sharon let her eyelids fall closed and her lips part the fifth and final sense. That was illegal, by the way, she said. Maybe not where you're from, but here you need a helmet to ride a motorcycle, just so you know. I know, said Travis, but it's fine. I was going way too fast for anyone to pull me over. Sharon almost dropped the lip balm. What? Once you get up to 110, cops can't get enough speed to catch you, not till you're long gone. Sharon pressed her moisturized lips together. Had they really gone that fast? It had felt so easy, so safe. She replaced the bomb in her purse and pretended to rummage for something else. So two wrongs make a right. At that moment, Sharon felt a circular piece of metal pass between her fingers, her wedding ring. 3 wrongs, he said, her eyes shot up. 3. I saw your car outside the coffee shop. His eyes held hers with an air of mockery. A smirk crept into the corner of his mouth. Sharon leaned back, propping herself up with one hand. She brought up one leg and perched it on the seat. She was draped over his vehicle like a decoration. Travis did not break eye contact. He did not look at the two shapely, naked limbs adorning his property. They had caught him off guard before. Not this time, his eyes seemed to say. He shouldered his gym bag and headed down to the beach. Sharon hopped off the motorcycle and followed. What was he waiting for? The anticipation was unbearable. In the sand, traces of quartz glinted in the sunlight, winking at her as she passed. Even the beach mocked her. Travis put down his bag and helmet and turned to face the water. He knelt down and bowed his head, scanning the line where the sea met the sky. Sharon placed her purse next to his things, took off her shoes and covered them with her hoodie. As she passed him, he stood up, elbowing her. She stood with her back to him and leaned into the knowledge of his presence standing over her. It's very direct. She could feel his voice shaking. I have never seen such a wide or clear horizon before. Nothing gets in the way, completely open, completely still. Sharon rubbed her shoulders and curled her toes in the wet sand. She itched to the touch. It's perfect. Thank you for showing me. Her stomach jumped from these words. She turned and walked back to him. As his eyes came down to meet hers, they flashed in the sun. His jaw cut through the shadow of his neck next to the sinews that extended from under the collar of his shirt. Sharon lowered her eyes and played with a strand of loose hair. She felt proud. If I could create a template like this, I would fill it with different things. Like what? She said, studying the waistband of his gray sweatpants. My wildest fantasies. My wildest fantasies. I'm not telling you. At this, Sharon let out an indignant noise. She put her hands on her hips. He owed her for showing him perfection. If you want to know, you can buy a copy like everyone else. She shoved him playfully. The muscles in his chest were hard. He did not move. She only succeeded in pushing herself back a step. Suddenly, she felt very small in front of this man. They were alone. The only other sign of humanity was a truck disappearing around a bend in the distance. Travis gazed down at her, a smirk in the corner of his mouth. Sharon trembled. Just then, the edge of a wave bathed her feet, gently egging her on, before receding to give them some privacy. I don't even get one for free. Tell you what, I'll put your name in the credits as a special thanks or something. Sharon stepped close to him. Nothing but some thin layers of cotton and a few inches of space separated their bodies. So, he'd create his wildest fantasies, would he? I want communication, she said. Communication, huh? What to do? The ties that held back her rich blonde hair hung precariously. As Sharon slid her fingers under her tank top, removing them, the ties were released. Her hair danced openly in the wind. Travis was silent. Eyes were burning. Goosebumps ran over her skin. She turned to the water and stepped forward into the ocean. The water rose to his knees. She did not look back. Waves closed around her waist. She lowered herself onto her neck and stuck out. As she stepped through the water, she heard a crescendo of loud splashing behind her. Sharon closed her eyes. His presence engulfed her. From the shapes of heat outlined against the cold sea, she made out Travis's hands. They seemed to be everywhere at once. He had been studying her just as his eyes had been all these months. The long, sinewy body she felt next to her was the result of dozens of hours of exercise that had made him ripples of iron. Sharon felt herself being lifted out of the water. Travis began to please her. She gasped and dug her fingers into his hair. He was relentless. With nothing but a flawless horizon, Sharon was enjoying herself. There wasn't another soul around, but the complete openness of their surroundings made her feel as if she had come to see the world. Sharon held herself in her hands. She was trembling with shame. Oh, please. Oh, please. She begged. He did not stop. A few minutes later, another pleasure came. Travis lowered her back into the water. They kissed. Sharon tasted him. She couldn't remember liking herself more. Then she felt them begin to work together. He grabbed her by the neck and forced her to look at him. His eyes penetrated her even deeper. They told her that the opportunity to protest had long passed. Everything she did brought her here. Now she will accept it. Sharon pressed her head meekly against his. They spent their time the way Travis wanted. She liked it, even though it was on the verge of pain. Soon she was enjoying herself again. A deep, low rumble echoed nearby. Sharon held Travis tightly. Storm. No, the clouds were quiet and pink. Travis lifted his head. This time she felt a grumbling in her hands. Every muscle in Travis's face, every sinew in his neck was tense. He seemed unbearably tense. A roar came from him. With a third growl that nearly turned into a roar, Travis pushed Sharon back and forth on top of him. His eyes were a red, hot brand that seared her, branding her as his own. Sharon thought she was exhausted, but now she found a second wind. She clung to him and helped him work. She held his gaze, determined not to look away. She was pleased again. Travis lifted her off of him and dunked her head in the water. Sharon understood. The tension she had caused and enjoyed was hitting her. She embraced it, poured it out with care and enthusiasm. One thought kept popping up in her head: I made it. Travis pulled her up. She barely had time to catch her breath before his mouth was on hers. They held still. He was the one warm spot in a giant, cold sea. Sharon wondered if she was the same for him. He carried her back to shore. They dried themselves with towels from his gym bag and retrieved their scattered clothes. In the glow of twilight, they stood before each other much the same as when they first arrived, damp hair notwithstanding. I can't give you what you want right now, Travis said. It's not a fantasy if it's really happening. Sharon didn't want to talk. She leaned against him. He put one arm around her. Travis stroked her face, pressing his lips to her forehead. It almost felt like home. It occurred to Sharon that she wanted this even more. Comfort, not passion. It was hard to remember that they had barely spoken until that very day. Sharon remembered that a different life awaited her at home. She reached into her purse to check her phone. Her battery died. What time is it? She had just said the words when his hand patted her back. Frightened, she dropped her phone and purse. The contents spilled out onto the sand. Oh, she gasped. Realizing that his move was inappropriate, Travis let her go. Sorry. He knelt to pick up her things. All is well. She laughed as she knelt down next to him. Sharon had forgotten how much younger Travis was. She hadn't felt such clumsy attempts at intimacy since college. It was a shame then, now that was strange. She put her phone, keys, lip balm, and other things in her purse and stood up. Travis was squatting. He was examining a small object in the semi-darkness. He slowly stood up and handed it to her. It was her engagement ring. Sharon took it. She noticed that he was looking intently at her. His constant undercurrent took the form of quiet, pure anger. This made her blood run cold. Her betrayal dawned on him in the sunset. She was alone in the dark. Travis grabbed his bag and helmet and left. His long legs covered an awful lot of ground. Travis, wait. Call another ride. He snapped. I can't. My phone's dead. Please. Travis stopped. After a moment, he turned back. He thrust the helmet into her hands and stalked off again without a sound. The drive back, Sharon could feel the 100-mile-per-hour speed. Every turn and lane change, Travis jerked the handlebars abruptly. It was a wordless tirade at terminal velocity. What worried her more was she could no longer feel the rise and fall of his breath. It prevented even that much contact between their bodies. Sharon only held him tighter and shut her eyes to the torrent of motion outside the helmet. Just let me know you're there, she thought. The screech of a tire jolted her against him. She opened her eyes. There was her car, right alongside them. The earth was motionless again. After a long moment, Travis's body swelled. He drew a deep breath and sighed. Sharon let him go and stepped off the motorcycle. She tucked his helmet under one arm. Travis leaned on his elbows, faced forward. The wind had swept his wet hair permanently into the shape of that of a man still flying forward like a bullet. It seemed if she blinked, he'd be gone. She did not blink. I should have guessed, said Travis. You never talked about yourself once. He looked at her, expressionless. His anger had been something. This was nothing. It was all up to her. She began, I'm married. We have a daughter. Travis winced. She just turned 18. 18? Wait, how old are you? Despite the situation, Sharon couldn't help but feel insecure. He thought she was much younger. I mean, never mind, he said, embarrassed by his outburst. My husband is cheating on me, has been for months. Travis scoffed. He is. I've seen it, said Sharon with more confidence than she knew she had. Two wrongs make a right, muttered Travis absently. So divorce him, he said. We have a prenup. If we divorce, I get nothing. Stay with friends or family just till you're on your feet. She shook her head. I'm bought and paid for, but you can have me for free. Shocked, Travis tried to stand up. He tripped over the motorcycle and landed back on the seat at her eye level. Sharon couldn't believe it either. She brazenly admitted that she was for sale. Travis's eyes drilled into hers, every ounce of scrutiny searching for another interpretation, but finding none. He grabbed his helmet. His movement was so sudden, and she held him so tightly that she fell on top of him. Sharon held his shoulder. Her leg brushed against his thigh. After a while, she retreated and sadly returned to her car. What's your number? Came his voice from behind. Sharon stopped. Travis stared at the helmet in his lap. What was that? Travis did not repeat himself. He removed his cell phone from his pocket. He glanced up, waiting. Sharon happily recited her cell digits. He asked about her schedule. She filled in all she could think of. He recorded the information diligently and repocketed the phone. You know Cedar Grove Apartments, he said. Yes. I'm number 212. Okay, remember it. Don't write it down. Just remember. I will. I'll text you the letter X. That means come over. Don't reply. Okay. If you cannot come over, don't reply. I won't. As soon as you get the X, delete it. Okay. Where do I live? Cedar Grove 212. If you get the X, don't reply. Delete it, no matter what, no matter what. Travis stared into his helmet as though inside were a deep dive into shallow water. If we get caught, it'll be much worse for you, he said. Sharon smiled at his concern. He was sweet to worry. It's my promise to break my risk to take. She gave him a kiss on the cheek goodbye. Travis donned his helmet and started his bike. He watched Sharon head to her car, ample hips swinging under the streetlight. We must be out of our minds. He took off into the night. The house felt different. For some reason, Sharon found herself wondering if someone else could have lived there in secret the whole time they had. It was a big house. How hard could it be to stow away in one of these rooms, unknown to anyone? In a few months, it would be just her and Desmond. It seemed a shame to let all this space go unused. Would a mystery housemate be such a bad thing? She wandered past spare bedroom after spare bedroom until she arrived at the game room. Desmond shot pool. He knocked balls into pockets, stripes, and solids alike, directly with his cue stick. The cue ball sat at the edge, untouched. Sharon lingered at the doorway, watching her husband clear the table. The cue ball was alone. He lined up a shot to put it in the corner pocket when he noticed her. He straightened and picked up the cue ball. There you are. I've been calling all evening. I'm sorry. My phone died, said Sharon. Desmond placed his stick on the rack and strolled over to her. Where were you? At the beach. Desmond pulled her close and inhaled the scent of her hair. Yeah, you were. He hooked a thumb under her waistband. No swimsuit. Sharon lifted her face to meet his eyes. No. Desmond pressed his forehead against hers. Anyone see you? One guy? Oh, yeah. He's dead, said Desmond with mock menace. Sharon giggled, not at his joke, but at the thought of him actually trying something with Travis. Desmond was over 20 years older, half a foot shorter, and his physique was quite far removed from that of the lacrosse champion he'd been when they dated. Though still very handsome, he was more of a comfortable, well-fed handsome now. First Paula, now some beach guy. You need to stop getting caught. I know, Sharon whispered. I promise I'll be more careful. Desmond rolled the cue ball gently along her back. He held her chin and kissed her. Salty, he said. Sharon kissed him harder in response. Desmond stumbled, dropping the bat. She knew what he tasted, and it tempted her. It was payback for the girl and his secret phone. He would have assumed it was seawater. It was perfect tonight. She said. Her big blue eyes looked at him lovingly, though not for the reason he thought. She was irresistible. They spent time together on the pool table. Sharon looked at the ceiling. She would completely allow him to dispose of himself. Let the buyer beware.
Subscribe to our channel so that your second C, Gaff, doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story. Because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.